Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a realm where reality intertwines with the inexplicable, where the boundaries of reason dissolve into the shadows of uncertainty. Welcome to the political twilight zone. I am your guide through this enigmatic labyrinth, where politics and power take on life of their own. In this dimension, the threads of truth weave a tapestry of intrigue, challenging our perception of the world we thought we knew. In this world, nothing is as it seems, and the truth lies buried beneath layers of deceit. Prepare to venture where reason meets the unexplained, and where the unexplained might just be.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Rick Wagner here, getting it right on KNTZ, KGLN, the internet, and podcasting, and all sorts of that kind of stuff. Thanks for joining us again. Hey, last week we had a kind of a technical show. I hope it wasn't too technical. I mean, in the sense of boring. But, and this is just, it's a problem for me, and I don't want to foist it off on everybody else, but I really get tired of getting fed information about things and without describing what the things will do. In other words, missile attacks and rockets and this and that, and they're going to do, and then you realize, I don't really have any context to set this in. How far away is this? How does it operate? How difficult is it to defend against? I mean, I know these seem like, kind of secondary concerns for someone that's just getting the news, but you can filter the news a little better if you know a little bit about it. And the unfortunate part about this stuff is most of the people who are reporting this on the television especially don't have a clue either. And I've noticed that there's just less and less experts, real experts, brought in to discuss this kind of stuff on all the channels. What you're getting more and more, I don't know if this is a cost-saving measure or what it is, but you're getting something that we didn't used to have really much at all, and that is reporters interviewing each other. Whole panels now during the day, like Fox is one and CNN has them, where instead of bringing people in that have a different idea or rather a skill set to help educate everyone about, this is why this is important, this is why they need to do this, so forth, they bring in another reporter to discuss the situation. Now, sometimes that person has some insight. They're on the ground. They can tell you a little bit of what's happening. They may have sources in whatever industry you're talking about, defense industry, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, that's fine. But the idea that you could have this endless parade of people who essentially interview other people, interviewing themselves, I think gets a little drawn out. I don't think it gives you the information you want. And then there's this sort of approach as though, our listening audience just isn't sophisticated enough to be told these things. Well, I don't think that's true. We've gone into some very in-depth stuff on this radio show over the years, and I've gotten good feedback from it from people who are interested and like to be able to puzzle something out and not just be told part of it and then move on. So that's kind of the theory I have there. We're moving into a significantly more technical age. Technology is taking over all sorts of portions of our daily life and experience. It's also taking over portions of our projection of military power, economic power, etc. And it's happening at a very quick rate. I would say, using the old standard economic model, that it's increasing at an increasing rate. Now, some of it is a rush. If you were to spend a little time looking into the stock market, you would see that there are all sorts of companies that, as part of their pitch to get people to buy their stock, hold on to their stock, or whatever the case may be, about whatever the buzzword of the day is. Now, 2 or 3 years ago, part of that was DEI, right? It's like, we're a great company. We've donated $1 million to so-and-so, and now we have absolute idea to where it's going, but we're a great company, and people love us, and you should probably buy our stock or hold on to it. And that's kind of, the setting sun is kind of on that now, isn't it? On the other hand, on the other side of that, we have technological innovation that they like to talk about. And don't kid yourself. All these people are very adept at understanding what buzzwords are. And so AI, especially, say, 6-7 months ago, was like the buzzword of the day. everybody that had a company and was trying to pitch their company and how well it was doing and this and that. It was AI this and AI that, and we're incorporating it. And then you looked at some of what the companies were doing, and it's like, well, how much AI could you have in that? There are some companies that, you're going to be able to make things a little better in your bookkeeping, keeping track of your assignments, all that kind of stuff in the AI. But a lot of it involves producing a fairly simple product and distributing it. You can get some help from AI in that, but it's pretty limited. It isn't like you've decided to automate your production line for motor vehicles completely with robots. That's a lot of things that we're looking forward to. I don't know if we're looking forward to it or not, but we see in our future. That can be important, and that would tell you a lot about if you should invest or not. And this is what the pitch is. If you like that sort of thing, and I kind of do, if it's honest, you tend towards things like Tesla, where really Tesla is an extremely valuable company, but a lot of its value comes from people looking forward to what it's going to do. I mean, it's doing things now, but they have faith in the company developing more and more technological useful things because of the direction that they are. Partly because people think Elon Musk is a genius. I think he is too. And he's constantly coming up with things. And they think, he's been doing fairly well with this stuff. He seems to be leading in it, and we're investing in the future. It isn't like some of the other investments you might make where they fluctuate from day to day. I'm going to invest in the oil companies. Well, the price of oil fluctuates for a variety of reasons. Availability, crazy people trying to keep you from getting it, crazy governments trying to think that they can power everything at the windmill. All that kind of stuff figures into the price. So your ability to be fed some technical data is really important. The average person out there is a lot smarter than they get credit for. And they can understand this stuff and make better decisions if it's given to them. Too much of what we're seeing now in the news media is already pre-processed. It comes through sort of like the sandwich is already made. Everybody gets together in a little room, they talk to each other, interview each other, and so forth, and then they come to a conclusion, which is sort of the ready-made sandwich wrapped up in the bag. Maybe you'd like to make your own sandwich. Maybe you'd like to take different ingredients, take a look at them, see how that might go. It's hard to do that now because they want to give you conclusions rather than tools of understanding. That's just my point. Maybe I'm too sensitive to that. I don't like to see the audience be treated as though they're incapable of understanding a lot of things or that they're not paying attention or whatever. And if people aren't paying attention or don't have an attention span, whose fault is that? No, I know. It's the people doing it. I mean, you have a responsibility to try and do that. But for years, we have been making the average attention span and the idea of how long we should pay attention to something, which is the same thing, pushing it downward. Many of you remember when MTV was in its early year or two. Everybody was concerned that it seemed like the attention span that was being promulgated on that platform was like, they're only paying attention to things for 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah, right. Yeah. Now, that seems like an old-fashioned thing, doesn't it? It's like, wow, those folks are listening to things for sometimes 2 or 3 minutes. If you look at some of the social platforms now, TikTok in particular, you're 20, 30 seconds. And then it starts getting boring to some of these people because they're not used to it. They want something right now. It's like a magic trick. They want to see it pop up, something appear, laugh at it, cry at it, point at it, whatever the case may be, and then move on. This doesn't leave a lot of room for what we think of as reasoning ability. I think that's one of the things that's slipping away from people is the time it takes to look at something and reason around it. Like, what does it really mean? What are they really trying to say here? And it doesn't have to be really deep things. It can just be products or something like that. What we're getting now is just signaling, very quick and very structure. I don't think it's particularly healthy. All right, folks, thanks for sticking around here. Rick Wagner still here on KNZZ, KGLN, and our podcasting, internet, whatever have you. I wanted to address the second big thing this week, and you've heard a lot about it already, but the Supreme Court decisions that really were favorable for the Trump administration. Although they're it's a little mixed up sometimes when they try and talk about them, I've noticed. And if you'd like to see hysteria manifest itself, you should go to some of the left sites about that news. They're desperately in need of some sort of mitigation. Perhaps a tranquilizer dart, shot from maybe 30 or 40 feet away, something like that. But the easiest one to go to, by the way, if you ever want to take the temperature of the left without doing too much messing around, don't go to the Drudge Report anymore, because it is lefty, but it's not as well organized as when it was the right-wing side, frankly. Go to the Huffington Post. It is the kind of headlines that were similar to when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, right? That's the kind of way they treat news about the Trump administration. And there's nothing even pretending to be informational about it. It's just hand-wringing and predictions of the demise of our democracy, which they keep saying our democracy. I would like to know exactly what they thought about when they mean our democracy. I think what they always mean is that, when the democracy was such that we could elect, all Democrats and, do all that kind of stuff and continue to distribute income to people so they would vote for us. That may be a little long kind of explanation, but I think that's what they mean. But there were two decisions. You have to realize the first one is something we've talked about here many times, and that is on the nationwide injunctions. And I think most level-headed people in the law think that it's crazy to allow one of 630 some district court judges across the United States have one of them institute an injunction that completely paralyzes a policy of the executive branch across the entire United States. I can't imagine that anybody foresaw that in a constitutional way at the time of the Constitution, or even into say, until the 80s, 1980s, or a little past that, before we started seeing this stuff build up. And a lot of it built up, frankly, in opposition to Republican administrations. That's where you start seeing most of it. And what's really interesting is Justice Kagan on the Supreme Court, during the Biden administration, when this topic came up kind of tangentially, she was saying, I'm concerned about, nationwide injunctions. That was because some of the nationwide injunctions were going against the Biden administration. Now, where almost all the national injunctions are going against Trump, she sings a different tune, as is so often the case in those situations. Also, if you'd like to read the dissents in these cases, it's a 6-3 decision. So you have Kagan, Sotomayor, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, and it's interesting to watch a race between a couple of them, especially, to see who's dumber, because that's kind of what it comes out as. And some of the rhetoric in the dissents don't seem to have anything to do with the law. They seem to have to do with opinion or cultural ideas or whatever the case may be. And as a result of that, the controlling opinion, the majority opinion, was written by Amy Coney Barrett, who's, had some back and forth that I'm not too crazy about in terms of her rulings in the past, but she wrote a good decision, and of course she was joined in that by the rest of the court, and let's face it, probably 60% of the decisions written by law clerks anyway. But she answered back to Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent in a way that you don't see very often. These guys on the court don't usually take pot shots at one another. I think that the conservatives were getting tired of really pretty heated rhetoric coming from Sotomayor and Jackson about some of these decisions. Really sort of stump speeches, not so much measured legal argument. And the thing that I thought was interesting from Barrett was that she said that essentially, what she did say, Justice Jackson would have us try and cure what she regards as an imperial presidency by creating an imperial judiciary. Thought that was pretty clever. And that's the kind of slam that you don't get between the justices very often. So must be a lot of heat going on behind the scenes in that place, because that's not something that comes out. They don't like to have that kind of rhetoric exchange between them. But frankly, when these decisions go in the favor of the Trump administration, liberal justices just go off. I mean, we've had Clarence Thomas write some pretty strong dissenting opinions, but they're grounded, I think, a little bit more. I'm not just saying that. It's a little bit like looking at the reaction to certain things between, say, the conservative media and the far left media, which is almost all the media. Many times, if you look at sort of center-right, right-type media, they overemphasize something a little bit too much in favor of, perhaps, if there's an administration that's Republican or whatever. I mean, there's a little bit of a slant, but there's still news in there, and there's still things that help you kind of make up your own mind. If you go to something like the Huffington Post and it's something they don't like, there's none of that. It is all just hand-wringing, attacking, fortune-telling about what's going to happen to our democracy, and just it's pretty outrageous. They go from 0 to 60 like immediately, sort of like a Tesla Plaid, 1.9 seconds. They really just fly into a frenzy. And it's much more pronounced than on the right. I'm happy to say that, and I'm trying to be balanced about it. But if you look at it, I think you'll see that the balance of just plain Looney Tune behavior is much more pronounced on the left. And it's troubling, because that kind of language and behavior is what spurs on some of these peripheral characters to act out at some of these protests. And it's bad enough that we have professional protesters working in these things, some of these Antifa people and so forth, that seem to be showing up at places that are surprisingly far-flung, right? And here they are again, and then seems like ammunition starts showing up for them to throw things, and someone was just arrested in California for distributing masks amongst the protesters to, help against the CS gas or pepper spray. I doubt that person used his own money to go out and buy that and distribute it to people. It seems unlikely. So you get more of that with left-wing protesting than you do with, I think, if you want to say people on the center-right or whatever. I mean, which is very seldom, really. Now, there's some counter-protesting sometimes, but counter-protesters with some of these nutty left ones, these guys are brave, because when you have a narrative that the opposition is something out of the Lord of the Rings, right? Mordor, Sauron, pure evil, orcs, the whole thing. When that's your characterization of the other side, first, it's difficult to have a conversation with you about it. Secondly is it pushes people whose grasp of sanity is a little tenuous, and it pushes them in ways that I think we've seen them acting out. And it seems to be more often on the left. It's not like the right can't happen that way, but it seems to be pronounced on the left. I think it's because the rhetoric is so unceasing, and when things aren't going their way, they just ratchet it up. I don't know how much further we can go here. I mean, we have Jasmine Crockett, this pretty humorous but dangerous loon from Texas, who's now she wants to see Melania deported. They're not particularly interested in gang members being deported or, people who have actually broken the law in the United States. No, that's an example of the kind of weird overreach we've come into, that someone would say that and get publicity for it and be seen as a voice for a major political party. That's what she's trying to be. Is she probably a voice for the majority of the people in that party? No. But she's a voice for the controlling interest in that party right now. It's very interesting. Many Democrats that you know and I know are not on board for about 60% of this stuff. They may disagree with us about spending, about programs, about things like that, but they're not so hard into the social issues and cultural stuff. And that's who's controlling the party right now. It's a fairly small segment, but they've got a hold of the dog by the tail, and they're wagging it. So if they don't change, the Democrats are going to be. Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us over the little break there. I appreciate it. Yeah, we always appreciate all of your listenership here, believe me. So I know a lot of you are probably concerned. You're saying, come on, Rick, what are we doing talking about Supreme Court cases, the presidency, things going on, and, war around the world and so forth? When are we going to get to the most important issue of the day? The Sanchez-Bezos wedding. I know, is there anything more important than that? You wouldn't know it if you looked at if you looked at a lot of the online news sources. It would be it's the big story, even today. Now, how this became a story, it's not so much that it's a story, it's where it shows up, isn't it? Remember, and this isn't like we're talking about being alive in the 40s or 50s. We're talking about, maybe 10, 12 years ago, where celebrity, and I suppose that Bezos in some way is a celebrity, sort of was confined to certain areas. Society pages, when they had newspapers that did that, sort of, the Entertainment Tonight or all that kind of stuff, right? And you'd get a little of it in the papers, but it was, or even on the websites, but it wasn't the main thing. Now it's like the main thing. I'm pretty sure if we would have had an exchange of, nuclear weapons between China and, let's say, North Korea. Let's say they decided they had enough of them as allies. I'm not sure that would be the headline. I think it might be that Kylie Jenner broke one of the major rules about weddings at the Bezos wedding. And I saw that and I thought, what major rule is that? And why am I looking at this? It's impossible. It's ubiquitous, isn't it? But it just says something about our society. We want to know things about everybody that's in the news, and as soon as they're in the news, we want to know more about them. It's a self-feeding thing. When did Jeff Bezos become so interesting? Really? He has an interesting story. I mean, come on. He started Amazon in his garage, went for a long time, not making any money, believed in it, came up with a lot of the sales tactics that made the thing go, and then as a result became a several hundred billionaire. So, and that's okay. Hey, you come up with the better mousetrap, that's what people are going to reward you for. That's great. However, it always seems like he somehow is having, and why he would do this at his place in society and his resources is beyond me, but he seems to be having sort of a midlife crisis. I know, yeah, right. How obvious is that? Look at Lauren Sanchez. I don't know, she might be a wonderful person, but his original wife, who stuck with him all those years while he was trying to, make an online bookstore become profitable, she's in the rearview mirror. Now, don't feel too sorry for her. She got a lot of money. Now, money doesn't make happiness. We know that. But it sure beats whatever comes in second, right? In other words, money can make a lot of things that are bad seem a little less bad. So he's just out there, and the mega yachts. I mean, I don't know if he has 2 or 3 of these things that are like, ocean-going Las Vegas hotels, and it's sort of his version of, buying the red sports car, going down and dating somebody from one of the, tip on in, one of the waitresses, and then just sort of losing yourself, trying to imagine that, you're reliving part of your life or something. It's very strange to see somebody who has this kind of money, influence, and he's a smart guy, kind of heading that way. I mean, you're kind of used to it with celebrities and people like that. You see it with rock stars a lot. I mean, how often have you seen somebody that was I don't know if rock star is quite the word for it, but, a rock personality from, I don't know, the 80s, maybe even the 90s, and time has passed. They have aged. Not necessarily even in a bad way. Some of them even look better than they did when they were 25. But they insist on dressing like it's still 1986, and they're still on their way to a gig. It's that lost childhood kind of thing. You sort of look at our whole society has that sort of satiricon feel about it, where there's too much leisure time for many people, too much money for some people, too much exposure for some people. Having people look into your every aspect of your life, and you allowing that because you think it makes you popular, is an unhealthy thing. I mean, it's my opinion, but I don't know how you can get around it. It's not healthy for a human to live their life out loud, their whole life. And you see how bad it's gotten. Think about this the next time you see one of these Bravo celebrities, from Bravo, like Real Housewives of, Real Housewives of Tulsa, whatever it might be. The kinds of stuff that they will post. Now, I don't follow any of these things on Instagram or anything like that, but you'll see them pop up in some of the even quasi-reputable news sources. And if you read the Daily Mail, which oscillates between having some good stories and just no judgment whatsoever about what's news, you'll see this pop up, and they love to post photographs of themselves in the hospital, looking as pathetic as possible. And here's the other thing. These people go to the hospital all the time. I mean, comparatively speaking. I know people that have pretty bad health problems. They don't go in and out of the hospital as much as these people do for, and what did Schumer have when he went to the hospital? Dehydration, which, by the way, is a real thing and can really be a problem for you. We need fluids. And for older people, this is what I've been told, that lots of times the taste or desire for water isn't as strong, and you have to remind yourself to drink water or whatever else that has some electrolytes and fluid in it to keep up your reserves. And once you run down on water, it isn't just your tissues dry up, but you start losing things like electrolytes, which energize your body. And you can lose electrolytes that are some of the things that help the electrical portion of your heart actually start beating. So it is an important thing. But these people are in hospital all the time, and they love to take pictures of themselves. There was a time not long ago that when you were worse for wear in the hospital, you might let people know so your friends could send you something, maybe, sneak in a bottle of whiskey or whatever it is that you might have, but you didn't just play it up in the papers and try and look as sad and pathetic as you could possibly be. A long time ago, I read something, and I wish I could remember the writer because they were relatively well known at the time, but it's slipped my mind. And they said that in many ways, there are two kinds of heroic figures that society throws up: the suffering hero and the triumphant hero. And that you can tell a lot about a society based on which kind of heroes they seem to be interested in. And an overemphasis on the suffering hero, who is often just a victim of circumstance, and sad victim of circumstance in many cases, as the more heroic figure than the person who is overcoming things, meritocracy is exercised in them. They're the greatest of this or that. When you're the other way, when you go to the suffering hero route, it's not a good thing in your society. And we just have fallen down that rabbit hole, haven't we? Because we let everybody want to be a victim. Because being a victim of something gets you something. It gets you attention, gets you money in some cases. It's also a way to get out of things that you've done that were bad ideas. So there is now some currency to being a victim. Well, it's just one short half step from being a victim to being a suffering hero. And the suffering hero is sadly more easy to manifest than the triumphant one. And it's very interesting to see how many very successful, rich people who have fame, infamy, whatever you think about it, want to be victims or want to show themselves as poor me. Now, of course, there's the Jennifer Anistons of the world where, it's poor Jen. Brad Pitt left her. I mean, she's still living off that. She's also still thinks she's Rachel on Friends, by the way. She just adopted that personality. She's never changed it. But anyway, the suffering hero is a problematic portion of society. We want people to be held up as examples of overcoming, of achieving. And it doesn't mean there aren't people who have had very serious things befall them and they show a lot of courage in addressing them. I think that's very appropriate. They are suffering, but it's heroic in their efforts to overcome it or fight it, right? Not just because. The more you think about this, and then the more you look at the news feeds, the more convinced you are that society is slowly turning itself upside down. I know it seems like it's completely upside down, but it's not quite there yet. There are still a few things we have to completely invert before society is really upside down. Wrong is right, night is day, stuff like that. The whole 1984 kind of thing. Peace is war. The whole thing. You used to think that the 1984 type of stuff was an exaggeration to make a point. It truly is. But now we see examples of sort of this wrongthink emerge in our political parties. I mean, the piece in 1984 about trying to convince someone to say that 2 + 2 is 5 because they said it is manifesting itself in a lot of cultural movements now. Things that are not correct. But at some point, you're coerced into going along with them. There's few things worse in a society, a government, whatever you want to say, than forcing people to agree with things they know not to be true. I've said that before. It's never lost its meaning. One of the worst things you can do to someone is not just deny them things, which of course can be pretty serious as well, but to force them to pretend, I guess, to believe in things they know aren't true. It's that forced participation. You really see it if you go back and look at the Cultural Revolution in China. There was a lot of that. It wasn't enough to stay quiet. One had to be strongly advocating things that many people thought were not true or crazy. But they were forced into it anyway. That leads to sort of like to think of as a cognitive dissonance, right? It's unhealthy. If you go around all day saying things and agreeing with things that you don't agree with or believe, stuff starts happening to your mental health. It's not human nature to live like that. So, manifesting a society like that is not something that we should aspire to. And we're being forced in that in many, many things. You guys could sit there. I don't have to tell you. You could probably set 3 or 4 things right off the top of your head that part of the deep state, if you want to call them that, the legacy media, all that whole sort of smarmy thing that has arisen over the last 40 years, that wants things that it wants you to say are not just great, but better than the alternative. What used to be the normal thing. Now, this is just not equal. It's better. I saw that happening, I don't know, early 2000s. You really saw where it wasn't enough to live and let live. It had to be you live and champion other people's lifestyles or other groups' lifestyles, or whatever the case may be. And if you didn't champion them in some way, come out how great they were, even though you might disagree with them or think that they were not all that hot, but whatever floats your boat, right? No, those days are done. Many of these situations, you can't get by with that. Being on the outside, what is it the left likes to say? Silence is violence, stuff like that. No, it's not. Remaining silent on something that you either don't care about, don't believe it's any of your business, or that it's not something that you deal with on any kind of regular basis, is not violence. And this hyper attitude we have about calling almost everything that is a disagreement from the narrative that is sort of the general narrative out there as a violent reaction and dangerous, well, we see where that leads. I'm reminded of, maybe it was a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, some of you may have saw the story, about a person who went to Disneyland. I saw their photograph, quite interesting, and they had been misgendered at a restaurant in Disneyland. I made a big fuss about it. Someone referred to this person as Sir, when that was not the personality they were manifesting at the time. So they were misgendered. And because of that, this person said they didn't feel safe. That's quite a jump, isn't it? From someone mistaking you for another sex or something like that. It may be dumb, or it may be somebody trying to be insulting. Who knows why? I don't think in this case it was. But why does it make you feel unsafe? How is that a threat to your physical safety? See how we've elevated this? Disagreement was bad enough, but failure to go along with the narrative is now thought to be making people not safe. Now, I don't know when I started hearing the word unsafe. You guys probably can't think about it either, because it just sort of crept into the lexicon. I don't remember hearing I felt unsafe very much 20 years ago, at least that I can remember. Perhaps. But it certainly didn't exist much before that. It's a strange word. I'm not saying I didn't feel safe in that environment. No, I felt unsafe. It's a strange bit of jingoism, I have to say. Anyway, so we're just not going to talk about the Lauren Sanchez wedding. And I want to bring up, because I don't think I explained it very well, this ruling from the Supreme Court on what's happening with birthright citizenship challenge and the national injunctions. The decision is really about the national injunction power. It happened to come up in a case about birthright citizenship. The court didn't rule anything about birthright citizenship. They simply ruled that you can't impose a national injunction based on 3 or 4 people in one district who are affected by something. And if you want to try and take something national, you're going to have to do something like a class action suit, which has a lot of steps in it. You have to get certification. You have to go prove certain things before you can designate a class on a national basis. Class action, we see these usually in consumer products and so forth. Well, they don't want to do that. So that has caused a great deal of hysterics on the left. And like I said, if you want to go to the Huffington Post or something like that and see some, people
falling over their fainting couches, that's what you'll see. Plus, you'll see versions of events that you may have watched that you don't recognize. I see a version of events, for instance, they really don't like on the left. Here's a surprise. Carolyn Levitt, the press secretary. She seems very competent. She's very whip smart, and she just doesn't take any guff. They're always trying to say that she somehow, got blown up at the press conference. It backfired on her, and you read through it and you think, I think I watched that. I don't know what they're talking about. The headline is what they're talking about. In many of these places, we're just a nation of headlines. They just assume people aren't going to read anything else. So they can write a headline that is, pulled from various different sources, isn't exactly true, and sometimes misleading to a large extent. And you see that, and you may not read the story that has kind of a different story to it. I see that all the time. I also see descriptions of these cases that come to Supreme Court and so forth that are just not correct. They overemphasize the sweep of these things just to get people stirred up. We're going to hear the birthright citizenship case at some point. It may be in the next term, which would end in October, and the court would make some announcements at that point. But we haven't had a ruling on that. We did have a couple of interesting rulings that were about substantive issues besides procedural, which essentially the injunctions are procedural, or just a big deal. One of them was that parents, surprisingly, I know, hold on to your hats, can not allow their children, particularly this was about like primary and elementary school kids, to go to certain classes that contain certain types of literature. And the opinion, by the way, as I think Sandra Smith or somebody pointed out, the opinion actually has some representations from the books that were presented to say, look, I don't want my kid being involved with this now when he's 9 years old. These are subjects, one, that are for adults, and two, they're for the parent to talk about. So the schools were not allowing them to pull the kids out. And the Supreme Court said, to some extent, kids are supposed to be raised by their parents, not by some faceless bureaucracy at a school district. What was really telling was, one of the arguments was that if they allowed students to pull their kids out of the class, they'd have no class, or practically no class. One or two people would come wandering in. What does that tell you? That tells a story all by itself. It tells a story about the popularity and necessity of this particular thing. It also tells a story about the mindset of the people trying to put this on. Very telling, I had to say. The other one was a case that upheld a Texas citizen law requiring some sort of age verification to look at online porn, which some people ought to agree to one way or another. All right, we'll see you next week, folks. Hang on.
Thanks for listening.
Always
Listen, if you'd like to listen to more and you want to maybe perhaps have someone else listen to our podcast, you can do so either by going right to our webpage, politicalviking.com, or therickwagnershow.com. Both of them take you there. You can get links right directly to our podcast, or you can hear our podcast on Podbean, on iTunes, and Spotify, and a couple others. So you can find us. We appreciate it if you do. And if you've heard the show, you want somebody else to hear it, that's a good way to send it to them. Thanks for listening.